everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I just got back from an interview, so hopefully I get it, fingers crossed. But today I am going to be sharing my heart story with you guys. So I hope you're ready. I hope you guys grab some tissues because it's definitely going to be an emotional one. And I can't wait to share it with you guys and let you guys know everything that I went through with my heart failure. All right, so for those of you guys who don't know me, I have multiple heart problems. I was actually born with aortic stenosis when I was 2 months old. I believe my mom took me to the doctor just for a normal, baby infant checkup. And they told my mom that I had a heart murmur, so to go see a cardiologist and get it checked out. When my mom did that, the cardiologist ended up telling her that I had what is called aortic stenosis, which is where my aortic valve did not open and close all the way. So the doctor wanted to wait until I was a little bit older to do an angioplasty, which is where they make an incision in the main artery in my groin, and they travel a little balloon-like instrument up into my valve, and they pretty much blow it up. They expand it to be able to make my aortic valve open and close better. Well, they went ahead and did that, and it was unsuccessful. So the next thing that we talked about, or I guess the doctor and my parents talked about, was doing open heart surgery to just altogether remove the valve and replace it. So for that, because that's, a little bit more intense than an angioplasty, they had to wait until I was old enough and strong enough to be able to, fight through and make it through the surgery, because at the time they weren't sure if I was strong enough. Being a young kid and having a heart problem absolutely sucked, just because my parents were so afraid to let me do anything. I didn't get to play sports. I didn't get to go have sleepovers at my friend's house. I literally did not get to do anything. My sisters weren't allowed to play with me. I literally was just kept in this bubble of protection. And as a mom now, I'm already getting emotional. As a mom now, I understand where they were coming from, but at the time, it just sucked. It was just not a fun way to be raised. I always felt like I was different. I always felt like my mom was having to explain to everybody, why I couldn't do things. And I, was seeing all my friends play sports and my friends do this and my friends do that. And I literally just had to sit on the sidelines and watch. So as scary as open heart surgery was to my parents, little Jamie was nothing but more excited. I was so excited because I knew that once I had the surgery, I was going to be quote unquote normal. I was going to be okay. I was going to be able to be like every other kid my age. I was going to be fixed. So I was excited. I don't think at that age I really understood what open heart surgery was. I just knew I was going to go to sleep. They were going to fix my heart, and I was going to wake up and I was going to be better, and I was going to be able to do all these other things, So we traveled up to Cedars-Sinai Hospital in LA, and that's where I met my heart surgeon. We got along great. He was a very, very, very nice guy. He made me feel so much better about everything, and I was just so excited. We literally had to go get so much blood work and so many tests done and ran and everything before my heart surgery. But the day of my heart surgery, I was so excited. I could not wait. I woke up ready to go. I was just all right, let's drive to LA. Let's do this. Let's get this over with. I have plans. So at this time, I was 12 years old. I still vividly remember waking up and driving to the hospital. It was so early. I was one of the first ones to go back there for surgery, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning. I remember when I went back there, a bunch of people came back with me. It was weird. It was all of us showed up at the same time for our heart procedures, and they took all of us back in our own separate rooms. And just a curtain separated me and all the other patients. And I was the first bed, the first bed ready to go. So my mom, my dad, and my sister Sarah were all with me, and one of the nurses came in and they asked if I wanted to be put to sleep, you know, through medicine and an IV, or if I wanted to just be put to sleep in the operating room with, you know, some gas over my mouth. And obviously I chose the mask because I was like, no, I'm freaking, like, what 12-year-old is gonna be like, yeah, give me an IV right now? You know, no, like, I was fucking scared of needles. So I chose that, and they came back and they, you know, came in my room. They said, all right, we're ready. The doctors are ready and everything. So we're gonna go ahead and wheel you out into the OR. And I was like, okay, you know, this is it. Like, everybody, you know, pray for me. And then I started kind of like getting nervous because my dad was such a manly man. Like, he was such a freaking man. Like, he didn't cry, he didn't show emotion. Like, you like never got anything out of him. Like, of course he showed us, you know, that he loved us and everything, but I'm just talking about like sad emotions. Like, he never showed that. Like, he was never sick, he was never, you know. So as they start wheeling me out, I look back, you know, like, I give everybody a kiss and a hug and everything, and of course, like, my mom and my sister are crying because we're all just crybabies. And what really got me was when we were, oh my gosh, I'm getting freaking emotional again, was when they were wheeling me into the OR and I turned around. And when I turned around, I saw my mom fall to the floor. I saw my mom fall to the floor and my sister holding her by the arm. And my dad was leaning down and had his arm around both of them and was crying. And that's when I was like, oh shit. Like, am I gonna die? Like, what's going on? Like, why is everybody so scared? Like, this is a happy time, you know? So I started getting a little worried, and I immediately started praying. I just remember I kept saying over and over and over in my head, you know, at this point, obviously I'm 12, I don't know how to pray that great. So literally all I was saying in my head was, Jesus, please don't let me die. Jesus, please don't let me die. Jesus, please don't let me die. And when I got into the operating room, they transferred me from one bed to the other bed. And I'll never forget what this room looked like. Like, it was so scary. They had every instrument, medical instrument you could think of in there. Everything was so bright. There was TVs everywhere surrounding me. Everybody had masks and gloves on. And I was just like, oh my gosh, you know, like looking around at everybody like, ooh. And, you know, they laid me down, they strapped my arms down, and they explained to me why, you know, obviously. And they, you know, immediately went to go put the mask over my face, and I was holding the nurse's hand. And I remember just looking at her and telling her, I said, please don't let me die. And she was like, we're not gonna let you die. You're not gonna die, you're okay. And she just kept rubbing my arm and my hand. And she was rubbing like the side of my face and just was like, you know, it's okay, you're gonna be okay. And the anesthesiologist, you know, was like, okay, like, we're ready. And he put the mask over my face and he told me, you know, to start counting backwards. And I did. I don't even remember what number I got to. But periodically my cardiologist was coming out of the room letting, you know, my mom and my dad and my sister know how I was doing. And it was about an 8-9 hour surgery. And I remember waking up in the ICU, and there was doctors and nurses around me and my family. And I remember I kept pointing to my mouth because something was in my mouth. It was a breathing tube. But the only thing with that was I was trying to breathe on my own already. So I kept trying to breathe out, and whenever I was breathing out, I felt like air was being pushed in me, and like I couldn't, like, I felt like I just couldn't breathe on my own because I had this machine in me, like, doing it for me. So I started freaking out, and I threw my head back and I was grabbing onto the tube and I was pulling it and pulling it and pulling it, and I was crying, and you know, they made everybody leave the room. They took the breathing tube out and my family came back into the room. And I mean, I just remember them just showering me with love, just rubbing my arm, kissing me, praying, thanking God that everything was okay. I had 4 tubes in my stomach and then a big drainage tube. I had about 6 IVs, you know, on the top of my foot, in my arms, my neck. I did have the breathing tube. I had a tube up my nose. Not exactly sure what that was for. And I had a catheter in me. So as the days went on, I stayed in ICU for about 3-4 days. And as like the days went on, you know, they would come in and pull the tubes out and take some IVs out and everything. But the surgery went great and it was successful. And I mean, we couldn't have been happier. Like, it was amazing. So after my hospital stay there, I got to come home, and about a week later, my heart started rejecting the valve that they had put in. So I went to the doctor. My parents took me to the doctor because I got a really high fever, and that's when they told us like what was going on, that, oh my gosh, her heart is rejecting the valve. Like, we need to get her back up to Cedars-Sinai like right now. So we went back up to Cedars-Sinai, and I just remember them cutting my clothes off and putting ice packs all over me. And it was just like this huge, big deal. And I was so scared all over again, but I felt so sick. I was so weak. I stayed about another week in the hospital, and everything, you know, was under control. The medications, they got everything, you know, my heart working good again, and everything was going good. So I got to go home, and it took me about 6 months to recover. My teachers would come to the house and actually teach me and give me my homework and help me out and all that fun stuff, because I couldn't, you know, go to school or anything. So yeah, I mean, it was like a 6-month recovery. We had some bumps within that time, but I mean, everything for the most part went as planned. Now, this part of the story is where things get super rocky. So, you know, after my heart surgery, everything, you know, was great. And I had a good 6 years. When I turned 18, I asked my cardiologist at the time if I would be able to have babies. And they told me yes. He told me that, you know, I would just have the normal complications that any, you know, pregnant woman is at risk for. But overall, yes, I could get pregnant and I should be fine. So I, you know, got married, and the first thing me and Albert started doing was trying to have a baby, because we wanted a baby really bad. When we found out that we were pregnant, oh my gosh, we were so excited. Like, I was considered a high-risk pregnancy, and I had to not only see my cardiologist, but I saw 3 different OBs during my pregnancy, and I saw them 3 times a week. So 3 times a week I would go get 3D ultrasounds, and they would just check on everything. And then every month I would go see my cardiologist, about every month. Yeah, I would go see my cardiologist, and you know, they would just do like a routine echo, EKG, like, you know, just make sure everything was good. Well, during one of my echoes that I was getting done, I remember the tech was just like, oh, has, you know, the doctor ever talked about, you know, this with you? And I was like, no, like, I've never heard anything like that. So she was like, okay, you know, hold on. And she went and got the doctor. And I remember feeling so weird. I was like, why is she, like, something's wrong. Like, why is she going to get the doctor? And this isn't my pregnancy doctor. This is my heart doctor. So this is regarding my heart. Like, what is going on, you know? And at first I just thought like, well, maybe she's just like not used to like my anatomy. Maybe like she's just like, oh, like, you know, she has a murmur or something. But no, she came back in and she said, okay, the doctor wants to see you after we finish the echo and just talk to you about a few things. And I was like, okay. Mind you, my best friend at the time is with me, and Albert is all the way in North Carolina, and I was in Colorado. So completely alone, you know. I mean, I had my best friend and everything, but we were both like so young, like we didn't know like what the hell was going on, you know, like I needed like my mom, I needed my family, I needed my husband. And so after, you know, the echo, we went in and we talked to my cardiologist, and he told me that I had developed peripartum cardiomyopathy, which is a form of heart failure, and that the whole left side of my heart, the whole left ventricle of my heart was extremely enlarged. I was retaining way too much water, and you know, due to the pregnancy, and that I needed to start getting steroid shots ASAP just to help the baby grow. So if I did deliver early, which I mean, they were planning on it, that, you know, her lungs would be developed, that this was like the main thing, you know. So during this time, I mean, I had already been on bed rest like pretty much my entire pregnancy. So at this time now, you know, we're getting close to like the end, and I'm just like, okay, like things are just now starting to go downhill. So I call Albert, I let him know, and I was like, you know, but everything's fine, like you don't have to come back or anything, like this is going on, but they gave me some medicine, and you know, this is just pretty much what is happening, so I just wanted to let you know. So 2 nights later, me and my friend were laying in bed, and we're just watching TV, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I just cannot breathe. Like my heart is pounding, I can't breathe. You know, my legs are swollen, like, you know, and I didn't know if it was just like a pregnancy symptom. So I call the cardiology department, and I talk to an on-call nurse, and I'm telling her, you know, what I have and everything, and that I'm pregnant, and that this is, you know, the symptoms that I'm having. And she was just like, so, I mean, you're pregnant, you have all these serious, you know, heart issues, so I would just come here and get checked out. So we went, and as soon as we got to the ER and they ran an EKG on me, they immediately took me back into a room and started hooking me up to everything. They called my OBs, they called my heart doctor, and one of my OBs came down because he was on call that night. And he was like, oh my gosh, like, how are you feeling? And I'm just like, I don't even like know like what's going on still. Like nobody has even like talked to me yet. And so he just goes on to tell me that because of the peripartum cardiomyopathy that I had, that, you know, I was in congestive heart failure. My EF was extremely low, which is my, you know, ejection fraction of like how well my heart is functioning. A normal percentage, I believe, is around like 55 to 65%, was at 17. And so he was just like, you know, Jamie, like your numbers like on this EKG are off the charts. Like when I see people with these numbers come in, they are on a stretcher, like coming in through like with an ambulance. And so I just immediately got so scared. He was like, we have to admit you right now, and you're going to be staying here until you end up having the baby so we can monitor you. And I was just like, okay, you know. And so I obviously am crying, I'm so scared, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I'm like not ready to have this baby yet. Like this baby is not done cooking. Like they're telling me that my heart is like giving out on me. Like how am I supposed to feel? Like my husband's not here. I have no family. You know, my dad's not here. Like, am I gonna die? Like, just what is going on? I get, you know, into my room and everything, and some days start passing, and they ended up Red Crossing Albert home. So they pretty much got a hold of him while he was at training, and they told him that, you know, what was going on and that he needed to come home because it was super serious. My heart doctor also called my mom and was just like, you know what, like your daughter needs you, like this is what's going on. So after being in the hospital for a few weeks, the doctors came in and they did tell me that the following day I was going to be induced and we were going to have a baby. It was just very nerve-wracking, obviously, because nobody could really explain to me what was going to happen because nobody really knew. So it was like, I mean, I would always ask, like, am I going to die? Like, you know, is the baby gonna be okay? And it was always like, we don't know, we don't know, we don't know, which I understand, like from a doctor's standpoint, like they can't promise you anything that like they don't know the outcome, you know? But I remember them telling me like, we don't know, but we are prepared for anything. So in my delivery room, I had my OB and his team. I had my cardiologist, a full cardiac team, and I had a NICU doctor and a NICU team in there for Bailey. And I couldn't push because, you know, pushing, it puts stress on your heart. So they ended up pulling Bailey out with forceps, and I just remember them putting her little frail body on top of me, and she was just so tiny and so skinny. Like, she was only 3 pounds. You could see her little ribs, like, and you could hear her little cry after they told us that she probably was not going to cry for a few weeks because her lungs were so underdeveloped. Albert, Bailey, and I were able to take one family photo together, and then she stopped breathing and they had to rush her up to the NICU. And I just told Albert, please go with her. Like, I'm fine. My mom is on her way. Please, I just don't want her to be alone. So Albert went up there with her, and they ended up, you know, putting some oxygen on her and doing like the whole, I think it's called a CPAP, and, you know, giving her, you know, an IV and just cleaning her up and everything and getting her, you know, stable again. And the NICU was on like the complete other side of the hospital from like where I was, like where I delivered. So, I wasn't able to see Bailey for almost 2 days because they had to make sure that my heart was stable enough for me to like leave that floor to go to a different floor to see Bailey because they had no cardiac stuff over there. So that was probably like the hardest part for me, was just not being able to see like my brand new little baby that like just beat all odds. And, you know, we're both still here by like the grace of God. After Bailey and I were able to go home from the hospital, I became very, very sick. I felt like I had the flu. And after a few days, my mom made me go back to the hospital to see my cardiologist. And when we did, he told me that he was going to have to admit me because I was in congestive heart failure. And I stayed in the hospital for about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, right after Bailey was born. So I missed pretty much almost the whole first, you know, month of Bailey's life. I was told that if my heart didn't recover to the full state of 55%, that it most likely wouldn't recover at all. But by the grace of God, I had an echo and my EF went from 17% all the way up to 47. 4 years later, my life completely changed all over again. You know, I thought we were out of the woods. I thought everything was going good. Everything was getting better, but I woke up one morning and I was just not feeling right. Like, I just was not feeling okay. I knew something was wrong. Like, I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding. It felt like I had just got done running a marathon. As soon as I got to the hospital, they did an EKG on me, and no shit, my heart rate was 171. That is not normal. For those of you guys who don't know, that is very bad. So they took me back immediately, ran a bunch of blood work and tests on me, and my D-dimer came back high. So a D-dimer test is a blood test that determines if you have a blood clot somewhere in your body. They did multiple scans on me and they couldn't find anything, but the D-dimer was extremely high. So not only was my D-dimer high, but I was also in AFib, and AFib is an irregular heart rhythm where it doesn't allow the blood flow to flow properly, and sometimes it can get backed up and sit in some areas longer and cause blood clots. So after I was, you know, transferred to the main hospital in North Carolina, they did what is called a TEE, and that is where they stick a probe with a camera down your throat and they look around everywhere and just make sure that there's no blood clots, you know, in your lungs or your heart or anything. And they told me that if there was no blood clots, they were going to cardiovert me, which is pretty much, you know, like in the movies where you see people like shocking people's heart, you know, that's what they were going to do because it brings your heart back into a normal rhythm, or at least it should. So I went under, and I remember waking up and the lady, you know, the nurse standing there, and I asked her, I said, oh my gosh, you know, were you able to shock my heart? Am I back in a normal rhythm? And she said, no, honey, we found a blood clot inside of your heart. I can't even tell you the amount of fear that I was experiencing in that moment. The first thing that popped into my head was, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. Like, blood clots are no joke. I heard when they go to your heart or they go to your brain, like, you're done. So literally this blood clot could just dislodge at any moment and kill me. Okay, well, Bailey came out, so she's gonna hear some of this story. I'm gonna try to keep it not so scary. So, you know, she is 6 now. But so 8 weeks later, I came back and they did the TEE. And when I woke up, I can't even tell you how many doctors and nurses were like in complete shock. They all were just like, oh my gosh, we looked multiple times. We did not think it was going to be gone. Like, we just wanted to make sure it was, you know, getting smaller. They were like, we looked and it is completely gone. Like, the blood clot was completely gone. We checked multiple times. We had other doctors check, and we were able to cardiovert you back into a normal rhythm. So a few months later, I found out that I went back into AFib and I was hospitalized again. That way they could put me on, they called it a drug overload of Tecousin, which just is an AFib medication. So this happened, no joke, 8 times in 1 year, where they would cardiovert me, and a few weeks or months later, I would go back into AFib, and then they would cardiovert me again, and I'd go back into AFib, and they'd cardiovert me again and back into AFib, so on and so on. And I was already on the highest dose of Tecousin that they could put me on without my QT being too prolonged. Because if it is too prolonged, I'm at risk for sudden cardiac death. So my heart doctor just decided that it was best to go ahead and do a AFib ablation, where they go up, you know, through your groin and your leg, and they go up to your heart, and they burn the electrical pathways just to keep it from not going back into AFib. So it just kind of limits the spaces like where it can go, and it keeps you in a normal, steady rhythm. So having that procedure done, it was scary, but it was very successful. It was a 9-hour surgery as well. Albert and Bailey were at the hospital waiting for me, and I did really good with it. My electrophysiologist and my cardiologist are amazing. They're amazing people. They're so great at what they do. I am so sad that I had to leave them. That is probably like one of like the hardest things that I had to go through with this whole moving process, was getting a new cardiologist and meeting new people, because they literally saved my life multiple times. I seriously just cannot thank my doctors, my family, my friends, and most importantly, God enough for, you know, just being there to support me, being there for me, helping me with my dog. The amount of love and support that I was shown and given, like, I will never be able to repay anybody for that. It means so much more than any of you guys will ever know. I have been through so much in my life, and I am just so thankful that God has given me the chance to overcome all of these things and continue to live my life. You know, the number one thing that I would always say to my doctors when they would be like, oh, you're back in AFib, oh, you have a blood clot in your heart, oh, 5-year-old daughter, I have a 3-year-old daughter, I have a newborn baby, like, I can't leave yet. I would have never gotten pregnant if I knew that because of my condition, she would have to grow up without her mother. And that little girl is the number one reason why I fought so hard to overcome everything. She is my motivation. She is my rock. She is my saving grace. She is everything to me. When I think about not being here anymore, I don't think about anybody else other than her. And I know that that might sound, you know, selfish, because there is other people here that love me, you know, and I mean a lot to them and who mean a lot to me. But it's always been Bailey. I know that my family will eventually be okay. I know, that my husband will eventually be okay, but I also know what it's like to lose a parent, and I don't ever want Bailey to feel the way that I felt when my dad died.
I thank God each and every day that I have Jamie in my life, and I thank God for Bailey. Some of you take life for granted, and a lot of us don't stop to think about the what ifs. Jamie is very beautiful, very outgoing, but down deep inside, Jamie has a lot of problems. At any given time, Jamie's heart could go out or something could happen. I don't know how I could live my life without my little girl in it. I do pray and I thank God each and every day for Jamie. And I look at Bailey, what a blessing it is that this little 3-pound baby, look at how beautiful and how much she's grown up and how healthy she is. Being a mom of a child with heart issues is the scariest, most frightening thing in the world, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody. And I thank God each and every day that I've got my little girl in my life. So remember that. Hug and love your children and keep them close. You just never know what could happen.